Welcome. We're back for another episode of the podcast, episode 5. And it's my distinct pleasure and honor and joy to have my dear friend Thaís on the
Mhm.
podcast with me. Welcome, Thaís.
Thank you, Maxine, for the invitation and pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and before we got on, we were just blessing up the space and calling in our ancestors and lighting a candle because this feels very, very sacred, the conversation we're about to have, and our friendship feels very sacred. I was reflecting on it before getting on here this morning, just how magical our connection has been. Thais, I was joking with myself, landed in my lap. She was sitting across from me at a women's circle in Venice Beach at a new moon circle a couple years ago, and we live several blocks away from each other in Santa Monica. And Thais has just had a magical journey. I'll share a little bit about you, and if you want to fill in any details, you can.
Thank you.
Thais grew up in Brazil and studied medicine, became a doctor there, and felt a calling to come to Los Angeles on a rotation. And during that time, she met her beloved, who's also my neighbor, which is how Thais ended up in my life and basically retrained to become a doctor here in America. And in the last year or year and a half, I've watched Thais really step into her gifts and her purpose in a huge way. She's one of very few people I know who are really walking the walk between between worlds, between the world of medicine and the world of shamanism, between East and West, between North and South, between so many worlds. And the more I've gotten to know her, the more magical our friendship has been and what she represents to me has become. So that's my short little intro. Is there anything you want to add, Thais?
Thank you so much, Maxine. What a sweet, yeah, just so sweet and loving to hear. Yeah, and to be just here growing and sharing this life path of learning and growing, expanding with you. And thank you for being on my side on this journey too.
Yeah, it's been
Definitely,
so sacred and it feels very divinely orchestrated to walk beside you
absolutely.
during a few years of massive transformation in, I think,
Yes.
reality on Earth.
I feel like both of us definitely have gone through, a lot of shifts and, going against a lot of what is maybe the expected from us. And I feel, both very encouraged by you too. So I feel it's very mutual.
Yeah, it is mutual. And a little bit more about Thais is that she's always blended East and West in her medicine and medical practice. She has her own practice as of this year with her partner, her spouse, who is also a doctor, who also bridges many fields and worlds. And we'll share more about that in the show notes. This is probably a good disclaimer. I had Thais as my doctor for a year and it was so magical, and hopefully we'll get into it more or people will just experience that during the course of the show. But I've never encountered someone who brings such mindfulness and presence into the most like earthy field of the body and medicine, and especially given how it's taught and trained. So I know she's bringing many gifts from past lives and beyond this plane to her work, and I've been blessed to receive from you in that.
No, thank you for the trust.
Yes, and not only was I so lucky to receive from her in her own way, but during the course of that year that she was my primary care physician, I went through one of the biggest initiations of my life. I was in the hospital. Like, I'm hoping to do a standalone episode on this, on my journey with that this past year, but Thais was really by my side, and we were able to really experience each other's magic. She was also in my leadership course last year, which was really my heart song, really my heart song, and she embodies the values and principles I feel I'm here to teach so beautifully. So that's another reason I wanted her on the podcast. And one final detail is that she did her training at UCLA here in LA, and she specialized in palliative care. So while she's a primary care physician and extremely holistic, I do feel Thais has this special ability to move through worlds and to bring that holistic spirit to the fullness and continuity of life, and even you could say life after death in some senses, if that
Yeah.
resonates.
Yes, very much. Yes, I feel like, yeah, my pole and my call in medicine is to bring spirituality and the soul back into medicine. This
Mm.
has been, yeah, just how it all started, right? In the as in the periods of like the first prototypes of both medicine and spirituality was all one. And I feel like really what I'm here to bring is to put them back together in practice, in presence, in the philosophy of care. And
Mm.
yes, thank you.
Mm. And we might touch on this, but she also administers psychedelics in her practice as one pathway to connect with non-ordinary reality or the
Yes,
fullness of life or
yes,
soul even.
absolutely. I see, yeah, psychedelics being a powerful soul medicine, literally. It's something that it helps people bridge the worlds. I feel like it is a very integrative medicine in nature too. It has been used for thousands of years, also very much has a shamanic root. I've had the luck to both grow up in Brazil and I've had the experience with just being part of the culture with ayahuasca. Actually, ayahuasca, the name, it means like vine of the soul or vine of the death. So it's literally it's something to really connect between the worlds. And also to say that it's just one of the tools. Definitely, maybe there's a lot of attention right now in the psychedelic field, and I always feel like this is very important for me to remember that this non-ordinary, these expanded states of mind are part of like our human capacity, are part of our human nature to connect with in so many different ways. And so that's where, like, again, like this the source of like connection with spirituality. That's where, in a sense, it's the bridge to connect with this expanded states that are quite healing and quite powerful. So it's where both the maybe the part of our expanded consciousness, which includes like our unconscious, subconscious, other names. It's where lives our intuition. It's where it lives our dreams. Oftentimes it comes as dreams, comes as symbols, comes as so many different ways.
Yeah, and I'm just remembering when we first started our friendship, we met in a public new moon ceremony and circle at a temple. A small group of us started gathering to share our dreams and do dream work together. So that's been
Mm-hmm. Yes,
part of our
yes, and
exploration. Yes, for sure.
absolutely. And just I want to acknowledge you, just the ritual aspect too, just where we met, the being in a circle, sharing and honoring a moon phase, or going through turning into a ritual, just like we did to start this podcast, lighting up a candle, honoring the present moment. All of that opens to this in very subtle ways to this expansion. Yeah.
Yeah, I could try saying it in a different way. It's an opening into the unseen, and the unseen are the
Mm-hmm.
spirit realms. We're going to define it in many different ways, I think, over the course of the podcast. But the unseen in the spirit realms You refer to it as non-ordinary reality, which I love because so much falls into that. Other ways of describing it are other dimensions, which I believe the earth is
Mhm.
moving into other higher dimensions, let's say, with a thinner veil, which we've talked about before. But the unseen realms, the realms of spirit, of let's call it spirit or energy that's not embodied, is quite subtle. And so we often do
Mhm.
have to quiet our minds and
Mhm.
bring some silence and presence,
Yeah.
almost some emptiness, which lighting a candle can help, breathing, deep breaths, or
Great.
meditation can help to really receive guidance and connection to these other places.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yes. This is. I sense that like the word that I usually use is non-ordinary or expanded is something that's coming more into the medical field as a way of defining the space of where oftentimes there is a sense of like timelessness or like a sense of like interconnectedness, a sense of
Mhm.
something maybe difficult to grasp and find words to describe. And o- yes, and the importance definitely on this presence that can be with this, some breaths, this being with noticing the senses, noticing the present to help our mind and body arrive and anchor because life can go so fast. There's so much like distraction, so much going on, you know, it needs a little a centering and a pause to notice what's going on, what's happening.
Yeah, and I want to add a few things to that. I'll first share a word. For me, the word I resonate with is the fields, accessing the fields.
Mm.
And the
Mhm.
field is in some ways beyond time and space because that's what we're doing. We're transcending time and space. So when we bring presence, when we use ritual or elements like fire or water to connect, when we come into a circle, which is another way of connecting and accentuating our connection or opening a field, we're accessing this field. And actually, quantum physics talks about it. There's some beautiful work around morphogenetic fields, M fields for short, but they do transcend time and space. That's how people can feel the same thing or feel each other across the globe. A
Mhm.
very famous example that actually Dr. David Hawkins writes about in one of my favorite books, Power versus Force, where he shares the map of consciousness for people who are familiar with that. He talks about M fields and he talks about one interesting example, which is that for the longest time, people felt that you couldn't run a 4 minute mile. It just wasn't humanly possible. And then someone ran a 4 minute mile. And after this person ran it, all around the world, people started to run it.
Mhm.
And so the morphogenetic field around that specific possibility or ability on Earth shifted. And for me, the morphogenetic field so much is about possibility. And that's why a lot of
Mhm.
people talk about expanders, meeting someone who expands your idea of reality or what's possible here. But I
Mhm.
love the word field because it's something that we already relate to, whether from a scientific perspective or athletic perspective, there's something there. The other thing I want to
Mhm.
say is that I really believe we're living in the most transformational time on Earth. I'm an archetypal astrologer for those that are new to this podcast. I read the heavens, the planets, the stars, the cosmos. And what I'm seeing is between 2024 and 2026, the biggest paradigm shift we may have ever experienced on this planet. The three outer planets are moving into new signs in incredible synchronicity. Everything from a 30-year orbit to a 250 or so year orbit for Pluto are lining up for planets. And so when I observe that shift, it's so important right now to notice that time on Earth is different. Another way of saying it is the veils have become very thin. We're going to talk about that a little bit in terms of how and when the veil thins, but I believe the veil is thinning almost year round at this point. And we have a lot of support. We have a lot of angelic support. We have a lot of non-ordinary beings, spirit, angels, ancestors with us. And so it's even more special right now to be talking about or doing these practices where we open up the spirit. And I'm so glad that you can help us demystify some of that from a medical perspective, from a holistic perspective. I personally haven't worked much with plant medicine. I do work with cacao, which is not a psychedelic. It's a heart opener. And for whatever reason, I haven't worked with plant medicine yet. And I feel because of that, I can really testify to these non ordinary states being available in everyday, ordinary reality. And I think having someone
Absolutely.
like Thais here on the platform who has journeyed with different plans and facilitates that for others and journeys without plans very easily. She's very open and connected, can bring a really expansive point of view on it for all of us. So, is there
Yeah.
anything else we want to say or define about ordinary and non ordinary reality before we move into some other related subjects?
Sort of just touching on the point of this understanding of entropy and how there's a whole research around connecting those non-ordinary states and understanding that those are states of like high entropy. And high entropy is
Mm.
actually a lot of disorganization, which actually is the opposite of our usual state of thinking, what we call is the default mode network as it is, of maybe more rigid, more looping thoughts. And what happens with both dream states, more flow states, uh, states of this on this so-called like non-ordinary or expanded states is that there is an increase of possibilities. So there is an increase of, ironically, disorganization so that we can make things that maybe we thought was impossible, running that 4-minute mile as possible because there is no boundaries on what it is. It's like, yeah, imagine a dream, what you can do in a dream. You can fly, you can maybe, yeah, see things that don't exist in this reality. So I think that's something interesting to understand how our brain is organized to function in real day-to-day life. It helps us to have some parameters so we can go to work, get our food, get our needs met, survive. And so it is a shift of like most of like our day-to-day way of thinking to connect into these spaces. So it requires, oh no, an increased awareness and a shift. Yeah.
I love that. And I want to state a bold intention that this conversation creates a morphogenetic field for people to believe in the possibility of connecting to their guides. I have a whole episode on that if you don't know what your guides are, but to your guides, to your ancestors, to the angelic beings, to everyone who's supporting you. And I always like to share this reminder that one of my teachers, Robert Moss, a DreamWork specialist, teaches that there are three categories of ancestors. The first is your bloodline, your actual DNA ancestors. The second is kind of soul groups you're a part of. So I identify as Jewish. The Jewish soul is part of that. Possibly the American soul is part of that. Even the lineage of women as a female is part of that. So just these groups that you're part of that may not be the exact bloodline, but is a soul grouping. And the third is the ancestors of the land that you're living on. So we have this support whether we realize it or not. I was joking with my husband recently that even he has spirit guides because I'm starting to connect to mine every day almost, thank God. And I'm building more discipline in my practice. And so it's funny to think that he has them even though it's not totally in his language yet or his lexicon. But the goal is to
Very
make
nice.
this available to everyone and to create a morphogenetic field through our conversation, through our openness, through our personal shares.
Absolutely.
So we're going to get into some personal shares in a moment, but before we get there, another reframe for people who are listening about ordinary and non-ordinary reality. It's an interesting and helpful distinction. is to really consider where collectively we accept non-ordinary reality. So collectively we're comfortable with it in certain areas. So the flow state in sports, I often see so much sort of spirituality in sports, like good juju and rituals of amazing athletes and flow states of some of the goats, the greatest of all times, all have their rituals and their flow states. That's a connecting to some higher power. That's being in the zone. To me, that's non ordinary reality. That's why it's ritualized. Another example is in meditation. Another example is in psychedelics. I think what's important to me and why I like being this beacon of hope or light or possibility for connecting to the unseen realms without psychedelics is because even though we accept it in psychedelics and a lot of people do them recreationally, they're still not integrated into reality. And that's the thing about ordinary and non ordinary. The comparison or the contrast or duality is helpful to understand both, but the truth is we can integrate both realities. I integrate them every day. So I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
point that out from a collective perspective. And I also wanted to defer to Thais to share about the concept of shamanism, which we actually both have experience training in. But as a doctor, I feel you have a very strong connection to that. So how would you describe that or define that for people?
Yeah. So shamanism term per se is about this combined diverse group of spiritual practices and both spiritual and healing practices that have evolved with human evolution and are originally found in indigenous cultures around the world. And what they do, the essence of the shamanism is the utilization of non-ordinary reality for healing. That's very much the key definition and essence of that. And and shamans are the ones that are considered the ones who help connect and bridge between the worlds and bring this connection, bring healing through this connection, and also expanding through some of the ways of shamans to connect and bridge. It's one that is still used in our society, maybe not so consciously, is dance into a trance state or drum. Actually, throughout the world, different indigenous cultures have used different methods to connect with this non-ordinary state. Plant medicine being just one of them, but it's not actually universal. And the most actually, the one that is shared throughout is drumming, actually. So beating on a drum on about 120 beats per minute actually can create a shift in your brain waves, can create a shift in your consciousness, quite similarly to like psychedelic plants or similarly repeat dance or like being on like a rave, people may feel even without any substance, can have that feeling of something moving. So yeah, so looking back, that's really the definition of shamanism is to using this non-ordinary states to connect with on their like worldview would be called other worlds in in which can be different for each individual, whatever you're gonna call it. But it's generally that's another interesting thing that is like throughout all the different cultures all around the world, there is a very similar cartography of these different worlds. So there is this understanding that there is an upper world, there is a middle world, there's a lower world, and navigating through those different realms. And different spirit guides, different sources of energy may be found in those different realms, animal spirits. So for me, it's just fascinating how people all around the world, like completely separated for thousands of years could create a very similar worldview and healing tools and healing ways.
I love that. It's so powerful. Even to have the data of what the drum does to us and our field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just what you're sharing, that it's really um a skill or a capability or a gift or a tool that transcends time and space. And that makes me really think about this earth and the consciousness of this earth and the gift that this earth gives us, and also the cosmos that we're on this planet, whirling through space, and there is a consciousness on this earth, and there is a cosmic consciousness, and that we receive so much from both beyond time and space. And I think, unfortunately, living in a world that has been so out of balance, especially in the West, with the patriarchal systems for the last hundreds of years, even thousands of years, some might say, has caused us to forget. But as we return to balance and bring what I call the archetypal feminine back in, the earth is very much the archetypal feminine. We call her Mother Earth or Gaia. We're returning to this wisdom, this earth-based consciousness, this cosmic consciousness. We're learning that we're multidimensional beings living in a multidimensional world. And that's why the podcast is called Heaven on Earth, because we can move between worlds. So many people are stepping into their gifts and shamanism. I thought it'd be cool to share that actually I first dipped my toe into shamanism. Well, that's not totally fair. Probably the first way I got into shamanism was I signed up for an innocent course with Robert Moss on dream work because I was always drawn to it and I always had vivid dreams. And I kept taking courses with him through the Shift Network, and 2 or 3, maybe even 4 courses in, all of a sudden the title shifted to Dreaming with the Soul of the World and multiple universes and timelines. It was shamanic dreaming. And I didn't understand that it was shamanic when I started, even though he would drum on a shamanic drum to guide our lucid dreaming journeys. And then, a few courses later, I realized he's really taking us to other places and teaching us shamanism. The other place I learned about it, and I don't remember which came first, I used to have an annual subscription on Insight Timer. And if you subscribe, which is pretty affordable, you can sign up for courses. And I took a meditation course. It was free with my annual subscription, where she'd guide us in journeying to the upper world and the lower world. So it was a shamanic meditation course. So I didn't even realize, or personally, my ego self didn't seek this out, but it found me. And I share that so people realize how accessible these gifts are if you feel called into broadening your ability to heal yourself, to heal others, to connect with non ordinary reality outside of meditation or breath work or gardening or sports or dance. I'm so glad you named that because I think dance culture and raves are such a big part of it, of where we accept non-ordinary reality in daily life and
Yeah.
collective.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
So, speaking of bringing heaven to earth and connecting to non-ordinary reality, I thought something really special that Thais and I share that I thought could be part of our mission to create this new morphogenetic field, although I don't think it's new, just expanding it, is personal stories and shares. And I know Thais has a lot more from her practice as a physician in palliative care of what you guys see, but I thought it'd be special to start with some personal stories.
Yeah, I can start. So definitely something that was very meaningful and like impactful in my life and growth and challenge too was having had was my dad when I was first year medical school, and that definitely shift my path in many ways of seeing when actually the importance of caring when there is no cure, the importance of being with, and the importance of communication and being into the support of the family in those maybe the most like tender times of life when being with someone through illness and loss, and for and that really like directed me to connecting with the importance of bringing again, like I said, this the spirituality back to medicine, and just and this care beyond just like more drugs or more medicines. It's a care of like accepting and respecting and honoring that we'll all gonna die at some point. We're all gonna, if if we're lucky, we're gonna get old and we're gonna get sick. We're gonna be sick, and there is limits to medicine, and there is a lot of in medical training this myth that we can always fix and we can always reverse, and that like death is merely a mistake. And this early on experience in my life really increased my sensitivity and importance of supporting when being with this reality, you know. And so in the on the practical terms, that opened me the box and of acknowledging the emotional and spiritual aspects of the healing. It led me to like throughout medical school be on the look for something more, something deeper, and that's what actually brought me both to the field of letting Chinese medicine and in acupuncture right after finishing my medical school training, and also to this path of like whole person care, integrative medicine, and then the move to palliative care was just natural. It's just like feel that we're literally spirituality is finally seen as like back into like the core of the practice, because yeah, you can't really, yeah, just cover pain with medicines. You know, there's all those layers of like the emotional and spiritual and the meaning, the importance of making meaning, making having the support. So that so yeah, to say that being with my dad and having not actually received the support that I actually wish I had brought me this longing to be that doctor or the other ones, or for both the patient and their families. So that was something that really it still brings me emotions and became a lot of my mission really. And yeah, and that's one piece I'd say. So kind of finish as here, but say one more thing I want to add is that definitely on the other side of the wounded healer would say too is that definitely having someone so close to me, like blood, heritage, and everything in another world, I felt that it's helped me to feel even more connected and more and having more access to it. I've had definitely many moments in my life that I could feel his presence, even so clearly, energetically, and just so many synchronicities that I was just so sure that I of like being guided, being protected, and having just yeah. Even though like one example I could say for my wedding day, I was absolutely it's very interesting to see like how the sunny day suddenly at the ceremony like came like clouds came down and was all cloudy and it was literally heaven on earth moment. And having we did like a ritual of like calling all the spirits and all the loved ones that wish we were here in this realm at that moment, like of where like literally the sky was coming down. And after the ceremony ended, it was just like just this full presence and love and warmth, and then the clouds came out. So it's just like very 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 beautiful. And yeah, so I feel like it helped me have this very very clear portal to have someone like so close right there.
It's so moving to hear about that. Thank you for
You
sharing.
for listening.
I have such a tension because my mind wants to go to all these places. And my heart just wants to sit with the beauty of that share and the truth and reality of our loved ones' presence, that we may lose them in one form, but if we can open our hearts and our minds and our sensations, we can actually experience them guiding us. And I really relate to that. I'm fortunate to have both my parents, but I've lost three grandparents, and one of my grandparents, my grandfather, started to also enter my field, and I felt his presence and protection. And also on my wedding day, I felt he was a big part of it. Yeah, there's so much I could share. Yeah, I really relate to what you're sharing. And I think many people, many listeners who've lost someone close to them can maybe relate to hearing that person's song or getting different signs and clues about their presence. I want to normalize that. I want to more than normalize it. I actually really feel and have been shown and told in many ways through conversations with people or conversations with my guides or my intuition how in these extraordinary times on Earth, on this planet, many people even sometimes had contracts or agreements to time loss so that their relative can help guide them into their fullest expression and full gifts and full contributions in this life. I don't want to suggest that there's no cause and effect here. It's just about divine intelligence and divine timing that there can be a gift or a divine intelligence or plan to the timing of these transitions and having our loved ones as resources during what's undoubtedly a difficult and chaotic or extraordinary time here on this planet. So that's one suggestion or offering or teaching. And then I can also share personally that my grandfather started to appear. He's not the first ancestor that I felt his presence. Actually, when I was living in Tel Aviv a few years ago, I tuned into a free conference online, possibly also through the Shift Network or another network, and it was all about ancestral healing. And I chose the teachers I liked. One of them I ended up studying with further. I reference her sometimes, Rabbi Tirza Firestone. She's one of the most established authors in ancestral healing. She happens to be a rabbi and Jewish, but she teaches to everyone. And around that time, I first felt ancestral presence. Actually, an ancestor I had never met, my great grandmother, I felt her entering my field, and I actually forgot about that until recently. And then over time, I learned to meditate with my guides and sort of these lucid journeys or dreaming. After a certain period of time, my grandfather started to show up a lot more in my meditations as a guide or a presence. Oftentimes, he's just present. He's not saying much. He's just giving me a really big hug and so much love. And he was so loving in this world, but even more so in this sort of angelic presence in my life. And this year, I alluded to Thaís being my doctor and going through a really difficult experience which I've been wanting to share about. I think I'll share a little bit about it now because the resource of having my grandfather was a big part of how I got through it. And I got pregnant for the first time. It was something that I really took my time with and wanted to be conscious for. I felt intuitively guided into this concept or practice of conscious conception, and it happened very miraculously and beautifully. And we had a very blissful week of pregnancy, and then something started to feel off or wrong. And it took some time, but when I finally got into a OBGYN, I learned that I had an ectopic pregnancy. And I had sort of known the idea of it, maybe not the terminology, but it was quite intense. There was a heartbeat when they examined me, even though it was 5 weeks, 5 days. And I was kind of rushed into the emergency room and told that I might need to do surgery to remove the pregnancy that night. So obviously, this was a lot of shock for me and my partner, who thankfully was with me for that doctor's appointment. And I will say that the week before all this happened, a friend had recommended um, a woman my age who's very gifted psychically and does shamanic journeys with you. And I had put it off for months and months and months. And I did this journey the week before. And I had known I was pregnant when we finally did the session, and it came up, and I saw the soul of my baby, what people call spirit babies, with my ancestors, with my grandfather, and so much bliss and so much light and so much magic. And I think because of that, and also because of the relationship I had, trusting what I could see with my grandfather, I was able to walk through this whole experience, which ended up being 2.5 weeks in and out of the emergency room, 2 to 3 blood tests a week, being monitored, taking medicine to try and resolve the ectopic, which can be life-threatening to moms, and eventually going into the OR for the dreaded event where I did rupture and did need surgery. And I want to say that that whole experience, it took time to recover, but that whole experience was a massive initiation. And I actually had a really big fear of hospitals, and I don't like needles and blood work. I resisted as as much as I can, or I have historically. But I was able to move through it with ancestral connection. I was able to be in the ordinary and non-ordinary realities. I describe it as the most human and the most spiritual experience of my life. And I really felt the ancestral support. And it's been a journey since then. It's been about 8 months and on a journey of conscious conception as well, which again, I'm hoping to do another episode on. But that experience is the reason that I launched my podcast, Heaven on Earth. The idea and the name had been in my field for maybe a couple years even. But it wasn't until I stepped through that experience that I understood that heaven on earth means many things, and we have these incredible resources. We have this multidimensionality. We can walk into, for me, it was the UCLA ER in the depths of darkness, really not knowing if you're going to have to be wheeled into the OR and have a bunch of strangers do emergency surgery on you and open you up, and you're unconscious during that, and still have insane support, insane connection. I think that's a word we haven't really used so much yet, but we can be in connection. And I think one way, one lens of how difficult these times are is how isolated we feel, how disconnected we feel, especially even after the pandemic. And this sort of rebirth into our multidimensional selves or non ordinary reality is a huge source of connection. So I wish I could say more. It's kind of a big story, but I just want you guys all to know that even through such a major, big event like that, life-threatening situation, of course, the grief and the loss of this pregnancy, and then surgery and physical healing, there was so much ancestral presence and magic and heaven on earth, and something I've learned that I'm trying to teach in different ways now is what feels difficult in the human experience or ordinary reality, good or bad or painful, from a soul experience, like, what Thaís was saying, bringing soul into medicine, from a soul experience can be incredible. It can be huge expansion. It could be huge fulfillment of something, learning, growth. It can be very connected to our light and our gifts. I don't know if I'm connecting all the dots fully, but I do think that it's a conversation about bringing our souls into human reality, and to maybe connect it more with Thaís's beautiful share, to hear how she was naturally guided into palliative care and this more whole, because that's the place in medicine where soul is most accepted. And
Yeah.
to watch her in her practice and growth, I think these are my words, but realize, okay, if soul is accepted here and I see what soul brings to the biggest loss or difficult experience, which is end of life, let's say, I want to bring soul everywhere. Why wait till death to connect to soul and connect to our ancestors? Why not use that resource and that connection and that incredible high, feeling our light, feeling our power, feeling our connection, and bring it to everyday life? Like, wow. It doesn't have to be the difficult experiences, but I
Yeah.
think even judging by my own journey, in a way, I had to go through that difficult experience and initiation to really validate both my gifts of walking between worlds and having a shamanic ability, and also how real that is, and that I don't have to wait for difficult experiences. And look at me now, I'm building a deeper, more integrated daily practice.
Yes. Definitely. I sense that like sometimes it is like facing that uh big word death that it's can be like the awakening portal, and there's also like we've constantly faced like small little deaths, like losses and change and grief. And so I sense that like connecting with the impermanence of life and whatever we have, it's one way of actually increasing our love for life, increasing our joy in life, and our and also I see that seeing life as maybe that acknowledging this interconnection, and for me that seeing life as a continuum, it can ease some of like maybe the avoidance around like the resistance around change and around the big change of death, but just like the little changes too, like seeing like as one thing ends, maybe another phase comes, another like you're sharing like maybe a more integrated self. And yes, that's where I see the teachings coming from, just change, acknowledging change and the impermanence. Very Buddhist principle too, That's
Yeah, I would take it further maybe and say, we were talking about this the other day, that when you're willing to be open to these multiple dimensions or receive the support or accept that there is a higher purpose or meaning, in a way you can tolerate more change and transformation to return to your true self. What we were talking about
Mhm.
the other day is how, despite certain disappointments or frustrations or waiting for things to materialize, we both feel so connected to the divine. We feel so, it's not just about that connection, which is alone so beautiful and full of love, but it's about being in the heart space and being in alignment with our true selves. And when we open up to the realm of soul, we're opening to a part of ourselves that isn't always welcome in the day to day or the workplace or any sort of interactions. But I can say from personal experience, it is one of the most fulfilling and richest, I'm using that term intentionally, it's one of the richest experiences for me in this lifetime. In probably in all of my lifetimes, this is the lifetime. That's a lot of what I've been seeing when I read the cosmos or receive guidance and messages. Often they're very collective, is that this is the lifetime of all the lifetimes. This is the lifetime where we chose to be not just human, but also a soul, to really integrate the two. That's another hidden message or meaning in heaven on earth, or this, I often teach about divine union. It's the human and the soul parts. And honestly, if you want to bring your soul into this life, it's going to require a lot of death, a lot of ego death, a lot of death of who you thought you were, or what you thought
Mm-hmm.
your life would look like, which is often influenced by the ego self or outside influences. I'm getting a little bit practical
Yeah.
about it, or maybe sharing some hard truths, but I think if you're listening here, you already know a thing or two about ego deaths.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And I mean, I want to like pause and acknowledge the what you shared and the vulnerability you're bringing and acknowledging. Yes, this it takes the energy and the dedication and the work it took you to integrate the whole like you could name on your death experience, like being there with a erupted uh, trump is something that it's really it is quite a like a vivid unique life experience to and to feel like that connection and the resource of spirit as part of your process is just for me it's just a testament of like how much spirituality can and help navigate the most difficult moments in life.
Yeah, and I think actually hearing you describe it that way reminds me what a microcosm it is, because you have the death of the embryo, which there was a heartbeat like 2 or 3 times when I had an ultrasound. There was a heartbeat pretty early on. I joke with my husband, it was a very strong pregnancy. We were both really excited. The baby was excited. Everybody wanted this to happen. And in a way, because it was such a strong pregnancy, the resolution was challenging. It wasn't going away on its own. And the death of the embryo and that it is life threatening, it was life threatening for me, just was really awakening. And, I feel actually in the first couple weeks of it, I was not couple weeks, maybe, I don't know, on and off that. It felt like a year long experience, but in the first phase, I was pretty resistant. Like, I'm conscious, I'm spiritual, I'm doing the work, I'm connecting, I'm connected. I don't need an awakening. I was even joking with myself, like, oh boy, I don't want a near death experience. Like, my mind wants to know everything and see everything so clearly. I hope it doesn't, like, I hope that desire or urge to see everything so clearly isn't leading me into a near death experience, which was funny, and it was nice to have a sense of humor about it. But over time, I could see it differently. I could see it from a soul perspective. I actually did shamanic journeying after with a really gifted teacher and healer and friend in Israel named Tila. And I saw incredible things. I saw how my soul contracted to this, that it was connected even to my birth, that it was a big contract for me. I had all my ancestors like cheering me on, waiting for me. I had a really beautiful encounter with the divine. And because we're speaking about shamanism, when we go through these experiences and these initiations, we often receive gifts. And the shamanic work, which really in my world complements physical healing and Western medicine, it it's really a version of soul retrieval. It brings back a part of your soul. And so there's a beautiful saying I learned of when I was going through this experience. It's a Jewish teaching and saying that God, or Hashem as we call him in Hebrew, creates the healing before he creates the illness. And it was so profound. I felt it so deeply that there was this big healing, this big light that wanted to come through, a big part of my soul that for whatever reason wasn't yet available, wasn't fully here. It's like I had to go into that underworld, that difficult experience, that depth to receive the soul part. And when I was doing the shamanic healing, I got so many gifts. I got so much light. I got so much power. I think I don't want to glorify it, but I think that when we can meet our darkness or our fears or our depths with consciousness, with light, with eyes wide open, with humor, with love, there is so much to be reaped. So I don't want that. I don't want anyone to take that in the wrong way or to the wrong place, but I do feel it was a huge source of stepping into my full self, my true power, and receiving a part of myself that wasn't fully quite here yet.
Yeah. Talking about initiation, yeah, that's that's transformation. Yeah.
Do you want to actually share maybe some anecdotes from threads or patterns you see, or what maybe the everyday person doesn't realize that people experience towards death, or that's actually more
Yeah.
accepted? Because I know whenever you share with me, it's so sacred and eye-opening.
Oh, thank you. Yes, definitely being palliative care doctor, particularly I work also hospice work. I feel like it's a bit feel yeah, honored to be entering oftentimes a very thin veil when I visit patients in their homes. And there is quite a it's interestingly, like I said, that's a field in medicine that actually has some opening space for spirituality. And there's this group of like experiences, often called like vivid dreams, or like they're grouped as near death experiences that involves many things that are just very hard to explain in the material world, but they happen so often that you just can't deny. And one that I can name is like this vivid lucid visions. And what I've seen many times is patients as they're nearing, sometimes days, weeks, even months before passing, they start to feel a very strong like presence of their deceased, the loved ones in the room. And I'm talking about people who are like lucid and like have like cognition issues, but then they simply like they either have like this very lucid vivid dream that is different than like ordinary dreams, that feels more like a visitation of like having the presence of their loved ones, uh, and and on the other side it's so those dreams, and oftentimes those kind of dreamlike states happen in awakened state. So it's like during the day there is this presence of, other times I've seen a patient seeing his pet who had passed away, a pet that he had a long time, he was very connected, and he was having the pet into slack. And then also you're talking about the different connections we have with like maybe shared spirits. They're not like from our individual family line, but for example, I've had patients seeing Mother Virgin Mary, and coming to them and talking to them. And those are people who like have never had those experiences before. Like spirituality is not part of their like it's not as much part of their language so much. And just acknowledging that my cat's coming to my lap to to give me some love and support, and just to say that
I
that's another thing that tells here, and to say that yeah, another thing that I definitely see, like pets that I like maybe like have this patient who was mom is sick, and her pet, her cat now can't leave the room of her mom. It just became her mom's pet, and it's always on the bottom of the bed and just coming up to her. So it's just always there. And to name some other interesting things about this veil, I think is also interesting that often like there is this language that comes up during this thin veil life crossing path nearing, is that this report of like seeing this language of saying, oh, I'm packing, I'm starting to pack, I'm getting to the train. Some conversations that the family is like kind of confused, but it's the themes of packing and moving seems to just come to the field of the person who is preparing, and or flying or taking some sort of like transportation. These themes are common. And the other is the sense of like self-awareness. So I've had patients saying to me that like I just say like see you next, and then they would come and say like I don't think so. I'm like, okay, I'll take that seriously. I think it's coming. I think we're not, this is like, thank you. And then like someone that I wasn't really on my radar or my line of time frame, just passes. So there is this awareness that it's well reported, and I've seen enough. And I want to say one more. I got very excited with this team. Like from yesterday, just hot, fresh, a patient, a caregiver saying that this is the patient with actually very advanced dementia. She can't really speak more than a few words. And she shared that just like 2 days, 3 days ago, she woke up in the middle of the night, very alert, like she was like the caregiver couldn't remember her seeing her like that over the past maybe more than 3, 4 years. And then she said, just thank you for all the care that you give me. Thank you for all the love. Just said all this like loving things and said like, I wish I could give you a hug, but I don't understand why my arms can't do this anymore. I'm feeling like I'm like having in this bed, but my time is coming, and thank you for everything. And then they both, and then the caregiver hugged her, and it just came into tears, and they had this very beautiful like moment. And next day so this is called like oftentimes kind of just like a surge of energy that can come, and another name for that is terminal lucidity. For me, that's a testament of like consciousness is beyond what we can really understand when we say about yeah, what is like consciousness when someone is named like maybe not fully conscious or unconscious, right? And anyway, so yesterday I went to see her, and she stopped eating. So it was just like felt like that was really her moment of like preparing and telling everyone. She did connect with her family too. Had this again unique lucidity that hasn't been seen in years. And yeah, so to say that it's a place where I see there's a lot of like the mystery of life, and it's just in the sacredness of it. And yeah, it's just, and I find that to be very comforting for families, and I say for myself to hear those stories and to be with making like bringing so much more like meaning and much more like layers to what is this like physical transition, the end of what is this like yeah, life on the physical earth. Yeah.
Wow, it's so beautiful. Thais is
Yeah.
full of these beautiful, sacred, magical stories. And I think that I guess what I feel I'm hearing is these experiences create even a lot more trust for the family that's going through the loss and for us when we hear it from you. Just to trust in the process and trust in the fields, the interconnectedness, the divinity, the sacredness of all of it. I think the trust piece can be very hard.
Yeah. It is. It's just that we've been living in such a like a materialistic worldview that this part of like trusting something that is so out of this physical layer. This is a process. And sometimes I feel like for me, what has been like the trust piece has come from my lived experience, and the witnessing and the personal. So since that's something more like lived and felt than like processing like normal way of like linear and purely rational.
Mm. I think there are a few bright points we can point to and look at. One is that we're releasing this episode around Dia de los Muertos, and Thais had a beautiful idea of tying that holiday into our conversation because it's a gorgeous example of where, as a collective, certain cultures really do accept life after death and ancestral presence and the interconnectedness of everything. So I definitely want to weave that in and really use it as understanding our roots as a as humanity on Earth, that we always had a version of this. So, do you want to share a little bit about Day of the Dead? I feel as a Brazilian,
Yes.
you have more
Yeah,
more
it's a
connection to it.
holiday over there, literally a holiday, no one works. And for me it's very interesting how like the history of humanity and those like marks between like the relationship with the time in and on the earth, like the seasons, in a global way of seeing it, it is between an equinox and the solstice is a midway. And there has been like this connection with the sky and the the, the stars is something that has guided humans like from throughout the world in different ways. And it is both like a holiday, like a super ancient holiday from Celtic tradition that came also the tradition of Halloween. And it's on the same time was like the Mesoamericans would have the same time on on the year to also celebrate this connection with the ancestrals, which is the Day of the Death. And then came Christianity and took and named it as the All Saints Days and All Soul Days. So it's like very, very, very ancient in many ways, very rooted in the cosmos and the shared belief from both Catholics and in Mesoamerican culture is that it is a time where the veil really gets thinner and there is like a closer connection between those worlds. So that's why there is this tradition of like literally preparing the favorite foods and meals and celebrating like life, which actually is like honoring death is a celebration of life for those who have passed and cherishing memories. And in Christianity, particularly in Brazil, it has a more of a veil of like going to the cemetery and bringing flowers. It's like a considered more like a maybe a sad a holiday, but it is like a national holiday. And in Mexican culture, I find it to be very just beautiful to bringing that side of the joy and of the life that was lived and this connection and this remembrancing of like all our ancestors. And yeah, it's something that like a lot of the traditions are from like bringing the light and putting the marigolds is all to help bring the light in the direction for the souls to come down. And it's and then like it's very funny and interesting for me being Brazilian too and moving here and seeing this big massive like Halloween celebrations and how it brings like a very like American unique way of like bringing like all this symbols of maybe the witches and the skulls with a different flavor and also acknowledging that it came from this origin, this Celtic origin of having this portal open and this space of like easier communication, maybe in some way, I would say.
Yeah, the thinning of the veils, right? Thinning of the veils
Yes.
means the divide between us and the heavens is thinner. We can see through it. And for me, it also means
Hmm.
you can kind of see the hand of God or fate in some things. You can see the inner workings, BTS behind the scenes. Actually, as you were
Hmm.
speaking, and we live in Santa Monica, it's kind of our holiday. Thais and I have done some Halloweens together here. They do a lot of decorations. They go all out. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about, wow, right, the skeletons for Halloween, right? The bones of the dead. But it's almost like the way we celebrate it in America is such a symbol of how distorted we are to the culture of death because it's just spooky. It's just spooky, spooky, spooky. We see skeletons and it's scary
It
and
is
it's haunted, haunted,
confusing.
haunted. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
can we just get complete with this? That we're all going to die one day? We joke about it, like this country's obsession with anti-aging, especially for women, and longevity. Now longevity is the most recent expression of like wanting to live forever. But
Forever.
there's this like deep truth, and I've had beautiful conversations with you offline about it, that we can't be fully alive. We can't celebrate life if we can't honor and respect and be present with death. Whether that's all of the ego
Mm-hmm.
deaths we go through, whether as a female it's connecting with our cycle and the monthly cycle or journey of death and rebirth. And actually, Halloween and Day of the Dead, it's the same everywhere around the earth for many, many years, but it's cosmic, which is that it's during the season of Scorpio, and Scorpio represents the underworld. It's ruled by Pluto, which is both power and, which is a great thing to contemplate. It represents in the zodiac both power and death and rebirth, transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about personal power that I feel really expands with our comfort with cycles, the cyclical nature of life and closure, and to maybe leave it on a more hopeful note. It's very cool. There's actually a house in Santa Monica that does a gorgeous Dia de los Muertos altar as their decoration. It's not haunted, it's celebrated. And the hopeful note is that it's becoming very popular. People are traveling to experience Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. We're getting more comfortable with these ancient rituals and rites and altars. And I know in my family, I cherish my ancestors so much, especially my great grandmother. I'll say her name, Zina. I never got to meet her. She came to New York only once from Iran. I joke that I used to see pictures of her. Her trip when she visited was synced with my mom having my older sister. She's a year older than me. So I have these pictures of her holding my sister, and I always felt so jealous because I never got to meet her. But that's really the first presence I felt in my lineage, and I wouldn't be who I am, which I feel is so much more my true self now. I wouldn't be in my power and my strength without my this connection to my ancestors. We really are standing on the shoulders of giants, and yeah, I talk about it here and there, but really this connection and this, it's part of my healing journey and healing our lineages. And I find that so many women and men and people who are guided to work with me or in my life somehow are here to heal something or repair something in their lineage and feel their true power, the power within, and that we're not alone, that we're really not alone. Unfortunately, our culture,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this country, glorifies the solo founder and these myths, these stories that are truly myths. And the reality is that no one creates anything alone, and there's way more wholeness when we start to move through life feeling this interconnectedness, feeling really sensing the fields that we're a part of. And Dia de los Muertos is like the biggest field. It's this ancient holiday. Like, it's so cool to hear you say that it was a day off. That's so radical for at least this country to have a day off of work to honor the ancestors and cook their favorite foods. How beautiful and sacred is that?
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
So I want to wrap up. I feel there were so many beautiful shares in our time together, and we could do so many of these conversations. I think if I could summarize a few things I want to leave everyone with, and you're welcome to add to it. One is like, let's create this new morphogenetic field together of how powerful we are, how connected we are, how much presence and support there is. And just that we can all, the possibility of each of us with our biology and our beautiful vessels, this body, to really connect. We have that ability. We don't need an outside substance, although we can tap into that and use it, especially consciously with guides. And Thais does those guided journeys. And so the first is the morphogenetic field. And I think the second thing is really the interconnectedness of life and death and our ability to be with the death, even in our own life, right? That ego death or that rupture or that loss. It's like the more, and I think we're learning this collectively, maybe in different language, but our ability to be with the grief, like Judaism has such beautiful ritual around grief and mourning and loss. Our ability to really be present with it expands our ability for life. And I guess the third thing is just being hopeful that this is coming back. This consciousness is returning. That's what's so extraordinary about this
Mm-hmm.
time on Earth. May Thais be a testament to that. Someone who went through two medical systems and even more than that, I feel Chinese medicine, Western medicine in Brazil, in America, and was really like if we had time I would share her whole story, was really guided, was extracted from that system to build something new. And on that note, I really want to promote what she's building and her personal practice. I'll hand it to you to share a little bit about more what we're up to, but I want to share some links and she's been a gift in my life and I know she's been a gift in all of her patients' lives. So why don't I throw it to you to share a little bit about how people can connect with you?
Oh, thank you for the space to just yeah to share. I have practiced me and my husband. It's called integrative philology, and the essence of the practice is coming from the word philology, right? It's coming. It's like the art, science, and practice of healing. Which means for me and for us, bringing in the all the layers of like the beyond the body, the emotional field, the spiritual field, the soul, as part of the healing, as part of like feeling whole again. And it can be through, so the ways we do so is supporting people, patients going through like either like life changes or just like medical health issues, and helping through both guiding using Eastern and Western medicine, acupuncture, sound, vibration, coaching, all the tools that are possible to help connect with this inner knowing, this inner source of like healing, which can have many names, right? The unconscious, or in many different ways of accessing it, from meditation, visualizations to rituals, and the use of journeys, such as using ketamine as a psychedelic medicine to help connect with other realms. So whatever is needed, just being with and helping transformation, initiation, and yeah, both in the physical body, being medical doctors, and bringing in like the roots of medicine back again, like I said, being in the soul of medicine, being like the first or virgins of what a medicine healer would be.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Thank
Yes,
you.
yeah,
Thank you for
please check
spending
our
this time
website
with me.
and be in connection too. Thank you.
Yes, and wishing everyone a sacred holiday, whichever version or expression of it you celebrate. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all your attention here, and love to hear your comments.
Amazing.